Welcome to the first webinar of the Bioflex Certification Training Series, the Bioflex Solution. Meditech and Bioflex is concerned with laser medicine, specifically low-level laser medicine. Many of you are familiar with lasers used in heating tissues, for example, aesthetics, burning tissues with lasers to perhaps cut the lens in the eye for LASIK eye surgery, that kind of thing. However, what we're concerned with is low-level lasers and other sources of light that do not cause any thermal damage or heat tissues up to any great degree. Our company is really divided into two separate sections. One is the manufacture of Bioflex laser therapy equipment. We have different types or forms of equipment, everything from professional systems to at-home personal systems to veterinarian systems. We pride ourselves on professional development. Obviously, having certification trainings is very critical in understanding on how to use the equipment and be successful with treating your patients. We do this either online, as you're doing right now, or in person for a 2-day certification training, typically in Toronto once a month, but other cities throughout North America throughout the year as well. I'm Dr. David Kanashko. I'm the Director of Education and Training, and I do monthly webinars on different topics to treat, for example, trigeminal neuralgia, carpal tunnel syndrome, and so forth. So it's a good source of extra information as you get used to using the equipment. We also host master classes and advanced trainings and workshops throughout the year as well. All of these events can be found on our website at bioflexlaser.com. We also do a lot of leading-edge research and development, both with software, hardware, and on the clinical side as well, too. This ensures that our equipment is safe and effective, and we do this on an ongoing basis to make sure we improve the efficacy of our equipment and ultimately improve the results in our patients that we treat. We do offer both clinical and technical support. Clinical support is a really important element to be successful with training, not only with training, but also with using the equipment. You can email us or even call us 7 days a week here in Toronto, and you can speak to either myself or other clinicians to be able to help and guide you with respect to treating different kinds of conditions. Perhaps you have questions about contraindication or precaution or whatever it may be. We're there to help you literally 7 days a week. Our technical support is available 6 days a week, just in case you have any issues on the technical side of things. And lastly, it's very important that while you want to get your patients better, you also want to grow your business with respect to laser therapy. And we do have quite a few sales representatives on staff, and they can help you manage your practice with laser therapy, make sure you're using the correct equipment, and ensure that you're successful with this on the business side of things and your return on investment. So essentially, that's what we do as a whole with our company. Meditech International was started by Dr. Fred Kahn. He is a vascular surgeon, originally practiced in Canada, but made his way to California in the 1970s and 80s, where he was the head surgeon of a hospital in California. He semi-retired back to Toronto in the 1980s, and he had a shoulder injury, more than likely a rotator cuff tendon tear. At the time, he was trying to avoid surgery, and he actually approached a colleague of his, who was a chiropractor, who actually had a Russian laser device. And he got treated, and he noticed his shoulder was remarkably getting much better. He decided to actually pursue learning more about low-level laser therapy. He didn't really know much about it at the time. He went on to contact some of the key researchers in the field of laser therapy, including Tina Carew out of Moscow, Mary Dyson, Chukuka and Wemeka out of the United States, and several others, and started to develop and learn more and more about the use of this type of therapy. And the more he understood it, the more he was interested in actually making new devices that could perhaps be used even more efficiently and have better results than the one that was used on his shoulder. So he developed with some engineers and some researchers, some equipment. He had it tested at Ryerson University, then went on to do some clinical trials that were quite successful. And based on the success of the improvements of his patients, he decided to open up his first actual Bioflex laser therapy clinic in downtown Toronto in the early 1990s. He then went on to get the equipment ISO certified, Health Canada approved, and FDA cleared, as well as CE marking for Europe and other jurisdictions. And now we've been selling the equipment, and it's been changed and modified throughout the years since the late 1980s. We do actually have two very large clinics in Toronto. One in Western Toronto or Etobicoke, and one downtown Toronto. And we actually have North America's largest laser therapy clinic, and we actually see hundreds and hundreds of patients every week. And the basis of these patients and the results is what we put into our protocols and that are developed and continue to be developed by Dr. Khan as we treat these patients. We do a lot of in-house product development. The technology with LEDs and laser diodes changes fairly rapidly, so we try to keep on top of that and integrate that into our equipment to make the light more effective on our patients. At the same time, we tend to experiment on new clinical indications, and as we learn more and more about that, we're able to incorporate that into new protocols once we have approval through the regulatory bodies. So, for example, everyone perhaps has heard about using low-level laser therapy for traumatic brain injuries like concussions and so forth. And we've been treating that for quite a few years now. And obviously, we're in the process of getting that approved. However, as you can imagine, this is a new, a very leading-edge type of therapy. So it does take some time before it can actually be approved and put down into protocols to disseminate to clinicians to use in their practices. Our equipment is used throughout the world. We have clinics in North America, in most of the major continents, and everyone is using our equipment quite effectively, whether that's in rehabilitation or the medical settings, including hospitals. As I mentioned earlier, we do have Health Canada approval, FDA clearance, and CE verification and UL registration for our equipment. This is really important because it is a Class 3 medical device. And therefore, we do need to have these types of approvals in order to sell the equipment to verify that it is safe and effective for clinicians to use. Now, our equipment comes in different, you might say, flavors, whether it's professional or in a more of a at-home setting or even a veterinarian setting. And all of this is based on certain patents that Dr. Khan's developed over the years. These patents ensure that the light is properly administered to the tissues as far as the energy density goes and the dosages go into the tissues to be effective. One thing you'll learn as we move forward with the certification training webinars is that light therapy, or really what's referred to now as photobiomodulation therapy, is dosage dependent, which essentially means that you need to get the correct dosage into your patient, into the tissue to be effective. If the dosage is in fact too low, then unfortunately the effects are minimal or not at all. And just the opposite, if the dosage is too high, you can actually inhibit or slow down the effects of that light therapy. So you really do need to ensure that the dosaging is correct in order to be effective on the patients that you treat. Our equipment is really designed to be a three-step approach. So essentially what we're trying to do initially is to treat an area with a large surface area of an array using red wavelength, so approximately 660 nanometers with high intensity LEDs or superluminous diodes. So in the example I've shown you here is that the array is strapped into position, in this case over the knee, and it's then turned on, and that tissue will be irradiated with red light anywhere from 4, 5, 6 minutes at one time. And then the next sequence of events is that light then actually turns directly into infrared light at approximately 840 nanometers in wavelength. And similarly, it is held in place for approximately the same time. And after this, we then move on to a much higher intensity light with respect to using a laser probe. We have two 8 infrared at 830 nanometers at 200 milliwatts, and a red laser probe at 660 nanometers at approximately 100 milliwatts. So the idea here is to initially treat the superficial tissues in the blood with the red and infrared arrays, followed by a much deeper penetration with respect to an active penetration of using laser probes of both infrared and red. And I'll explain a lot more about this as we move on with the training webinars. The products are designed to be used in a very safe and effective manner, and part of this has to do with the flexibility of the arrays. They're designed to actually make contact with the tissue. It's important that the light actually touches the skin in order to have the light directly go into the tissues and be absorbed by the tissues that are affected with the condition or the injury. The laser probes, as I mentioned earlier, vary from an output of 200 milliwatts to 100 milliwatts, depending if it's infrared or red. And they're designed to be held on the skin for a much shorter period of time, usually for at one point, anywhere from a few seconds to as many as 15 to 20 seconds before moving to the next point. And again, I'll explain the reasoning for this and why you would be holding it for longer or shorter periods of time as we move along in the training webinars. Everything really is controlled by our software, and the software has preset protocols, well over 30 protocols for both musculoskeletal and other conditions. And for example, here's a protocol for Achilles tendinopathies, where it's divided into stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. With the treatment head is obviously the array. So the treatment head is either a dual red array or a dual infrared array, or if you happen to have our first generation, that would be the LS750 red and the LS1500 infrared. And then you can see the LDI200 refers to the laser diode probe, I being infrared, 200 being approximately 200 milliwatts. And then you can see columns that say frequency, duty cycle, and duration. So I'll explain a little bit more about this as we move forward with the software and our equipment. We also have in our software our placement pictures that show exactly where the array is to be held in position, either with a strap or a weight. And again, I'll be demonstrating this in further webinar trainings. I mentioned that we do a lot of professional development. Obviously, we do either online training as you're doing now, or a 2-day certification event. If you ever have a chance to actually come and do a live training, that's also highly recommended, where we go over all the fundamentals, the safety procedures, placements, and customization. And I'll be doing this again all through the online training as we proceed as well too. As I mentioned, we also do master classes, workshops, and other educational events, along with webinars, typically once a month. Every few years, we tend to do a very large symposium where we bring out keynote speakers. For example, Dr. Norman Deutsch has spoken at events. We have key speakers like Michael Hamlin, a main researcher out of Harvard University, and other clinicians and researchers to talk about the current developments in low-level laser therapy. So both clinical and technical support are important, 7 days a week for clinical support and 6 days a week for technical support. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really critical that we move forward with using new developments in the state-of-art technology with respect to light-emitting diodes and laser diodes. So we recently incorporated a bicolor LED that allows both wavelengths to be emitted from one specific LED device. This type of technology wasn't available 10, 15 years ago, but now we're seeing it more and more developments that come out into the marketplace, and we can incorporate this into our equipment to make it more efficient and more effective. Our second and third generation of arrays are shown here, different surface areas, 75 square centimeter and 100 square centimeter, having the bicolor LEDs to emit the light. As I mentioned earlier, everything is controlled with the use of software, and I'll be going step by step on how to use the software to choose a protocol and eventually to be able to customize a protocol to alter a standard protocol depending on different parameters that need to be changed. That's the end of the first webinar, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.